Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. Joining me on this special episode of our show is Anya Parmbill, the host. Let me redo that. I don't know why I said host.
No problem.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. Joining me on today's special episode is the author of Corporate Coup, Venezuela and the End of the U.S. Empire, as well as an incredible journalist from the Gray Zone, host of Redlines, correct?
Yeah, previously that's what I did. I haven't done that one for a while because of the book and everything.
I haven't seen it pop up in my YouTube feed in a while.
Yeah,
but
no.
Hopefully after your return from not just Tehran, but all across Iran, we will get some Redlines. We'll get some new content. And, how are you doing today? How was your trip?
It was great. It was tiring, but it was worth it. We spent about 2 weeks in Iran, a week in Tehran, and a few extra days in Isfahan with some travel in between, like a travel day each way because we could only drive. So we saw more than just the capital, but not enough of the country. I would still like to go back. There's so much culture and history, ancient ruins and sites that I feel like I only really dipped my toe in. But it was an interesting time to be there too, with everything going on between the U.S. and Iran in terms of negotiations, but also Trump's trip to the Persian Gulf, which he threatened to rename. So it was interesting to get the temperature of people there in the street, and then in more an official capacity.
It was a very important time to go to Iran as well. I mean, you're reporting from behind enemy lines, I guess, if you're an American, and you guys, you live in the belly of the beast, you and Max Blumenthal. And you went there. There was a ton of great journalists there. I'm very jealous of all of you guys. It looked like you had a great time. But it really was a serious time to go because Trump had said that he would, think about taking military action against Iran after May 1st if a deal had not been reached for a new JCPOA, essentially. So what was the attitude like of Iranians? Are they worried, or do they not really care? What's going on with them?
Yeah, going in from my side, I was a little bit nervous about the timing just because I couldn't help it. We traveled with our young daughter, and I always feel like, too, even if things are going well between the U.S. and Iran in terms of negotiations, that makes Israel more of a wild card, and I never put anything past them considering what's gone on in the past. But Israel, once I got over that fear, which I think was just natural, and got there and talked to people there, you realize that Iranians don't really feel the threat of an attack. They understand or feel that they've demonstrated enough defense capability and capacity that the U.S. would know better than to truly poke them or prod them too strongly. And there are so many U.S. military assets in the region and business assets, especially when you factor in U.S. allies, not only the U.S. itself, but just international oil trade and everything that would be affected by a war with Iran. At least the Iranians feel that if the U.S. are rational actors, that we would never overstep, even though obviously things have gotten so tense over the war in Gaza. There were definitely times that, as I said, I feared that something could just break out. But they have been dealing with this for decades. We had the opportunity to visit the former U.S. Embassy in Tehran, which is now a museum called the Den of Espionage. And it is a monument to the events that took place there during the hostage crisis, but also the legacy of U.S. spying and sanctions in the country. And what you feel more intensely than the threat of war in Iran is just that long, hard struggle they've made against sanctions and an attack from the outside world pretty much being cut off for decades. But what that's led to is a very impressive sovereign capability on their part. It's forced them to produce things that, a country like Venezuela, for example, another heavily sanctioned country, never had the chance to develop because they were so dependent on the West for so long. And Max Blumenthal, my husband, I didn't go, but he had the chance to visit a nanotechnology plant, which was actually opened under the Shah, but is a place where they have made great strides in even medical and civilian use of technology, which is why of nuclear technology, which is why it's clear that the Trump administration's demand that Iran give up completely or go to zero enrichment is a non-starter. That's not a sacrifice that any sovereign country would make. Max also visited there's equivalent of the Aerospace Museum and saw how they'd successfully taken weapons that were used to attack them and reworked them in order to make their own weapons technology. And so they're very proud of these things. And the takeaway, I think, is that Iranians and hopefully Americans, people making decisions understand this, are not, and this might get said glibly sometimes in media, but it's very true. It's not the same thing as going up against some of these other states that the U.S. has gone up against in its war on terror, or its phony war on terror, and then its war of terror on countries like Syria. Iran is definitely not going to fold easily, and so we better be prepared to feel something back if we want to have that war. And I think that's one of many reasons that I hope Americans understand it would be a catastrophe.
I saw the video that Max uploaded from the Aerospace Museum, and it was really, really incredible. Every bit and piece of it. It goes from the missiles to the drones to the air defenses and stuff, and I was just shocked by it because, of course, they have their own, technologies that they produce, but a lot of the most advanced things that they displayed in the museum, as you said, were like carbon copies, but improved versions of the U.S. Drones or weapons that were launched at them by U.S. proxies. It's very incredible. I love.
How did it compare to what you saw in Yemen? Probably similar.
Well, Yemen is very. They don't show their stuff like that, so they don't have. They don't have a museum or anything like that. I mean, they have it somewhere deep in the mountains, and no one knows where it is. So that's. I didn't get to see anything cool like that, but I think. Iran obviously has far more advanced. I mean, they have hypersonic missiles and whatnot, and they have very solid air defenses. Yemen only has like the old Soviet air defenses. But I do want to ask you one thing that a lot of people probably don't understand as an American. And frankly, I don't really know what the deal is there. I can only speak to the countries I've been to. Is how was it traveling as a woman there? And like what sort of clothing did you have to wear? How did people treat you? Could you shake hands with people? These sorts of things.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because I expected it to be more conservative than it was based on even my understanding of Iran. But essentially, since the Masa Amini protests, you may remember, they were very violent and they got a lot of international attention after this woman passed away in police custody after she was detained regarding her clothing, but suffered a medical event according to the local investigation. But it did serve as the spark for women to go out and take on this issue. And it resulted in pretty much a formal laxing of the covering enforcement throughout the more cosmopolitan or urban areas. So when I was in northern Tehran, even though I'd prepared, I brought long clothing and long dresses to make sure that I was not pushing any limits. But I had scarves as well, and I most of the time only had to wear that around my neck. No one ever asked me to put it on except when I entered like the Press TV building, or actually one of the churches that I visited asked that I cover. But the pressure in the streets that used to exist from the public, just other people in the public, and then also the state, have dissipated in recent years. And that's something that every woman that I talked to recognized. And so I think it's, and as for treatment, I couldn't shake the hands of officials or certain officials. And, well, no, I wouldn't actually touch the hand of any Iranian man. But if I met someone like a friend or like friends of family in the street, I could like shake their hand, and there were men that shook my hand. I would just wait for the them to make the initiative. But that's similar to what I experienced in Gaza, for example. When I visited, I would never really, I would never make the move. I just think that's the respectful thing to do. But in terms of treatment, women are treated very well, and they definitely are in leadership roles throughout the government and media. So at least from what I saw, and women are very educated in Iran. They make up the majority of university students. So I think the West's obsession with the scarf and women's covering in Iran has made the issue, has held the issue, stalled the issue in terms of women's, like what the women there actually want. It's seen as a weapon of empire, rightly so. But the government made a decision to kind of take that off the table. And I think that works in their favor. And in the long run, Iran will probably look like other countries in the region where there are extremes of both. Maybe not tomorrow, but I think it's getting there, and it's happening at the pace that the Iranian people want, as opposed to something imposed from the outside. And I understand why there's also a reaction to that there because of what it represents, like the West winning in some way. But I think people on issues like that are going to move in one direction, and that direction is obvious from looking at society today.
Yeah, when we were in Yemen, I remember they had like the full face covering thing, and then when we went to the rural areas, like when we drive hours into the middle of nowhere, they'd have the full. You couldn't even have the eye slit, and I was like, "What's the deal with this?" And they said, it's not like how religious you are, which, I kind of thought, like, I don't really know. They said it's really just it's a cultural thing. It's a geographical thing, depending on where you are, what country. It's like, it's just different in different places. It has nothing to do with that. But that is very interesting. How is the economic situation? Because as I understand, I'm not saying it's a direct correlation, but since Pezeshkian has entered the presidency, there's been a very high inflation, like record high inflation in recent years, modern years. Is this felt amongst the public in a way that I guess wasn't felt before? I mean, there's always been a bad economic situation with the sanctions, but is it acutely terrible and noticeable right now?
It's definitely difficult for people there, and it is felt because I think the minimum wage is something like $30 a month. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember my friends telling me. And looking at prices of goods that I would buy on a regular basis, there's no way that wage would sustain a family. And a lot of the people, like even the professional media class or like middle class people, complain about things that we complain about in the US, but on a more severe level. For example, that they can't save anything, that it costs all of their money to pay for housing, food, and childcare, and that they eventually, people, I think, no matter where they are, start to feel like it's not just sanctions, but it's the government as well. That's obviously what sanctions are designed to make people feel. again, the situation there is not as bad as I've seen in Venezuela, for example, or other sanctioned countries. There's some of the people there actually do have a very warped idea of what their situation is. They think they're living in the worst country in the world because they also listen to the BBC Persian and previously the Voice of America, which wasn't operating when I was there anymore. And there's a Saudi and Israeli funded channel called Iran National that are both, that and BBC Persian are very popular, and they've given Iranians the perception that they do live in the like worst country in the world, that they are like worse off than Haiti or like average, like Congo or something like that. It's just because of propaganda. I mean, overall, compared to other sanctioned countries, they're doing pretty well. The stores are stocked, but the prices are high. That's something that people are living with everywhere. And I think people say they're like, oh, things were so much easier 20 years ago, or for our parents, perhaps. And that's just a trend that I've run into internationally. So, yeah, I think, but still though, the fact that they've been able to, and now you see like Chinese cars on display in the malls, and they've built these other relationships that have, I think in the long run will put Iran in a better position. But they were, for a while, every day, people would have planned power outages. And that was something that people said only happened since Pezeshkian came to power. And the way that they see it is that whenever there's a chance of negotiations with the U.S. or they're ongoing, the pressure comes up. They start to experience things like planned outages. That's why then there's a sense that they need to negotiate with the U.S. And people even said, like, if the negotiations weren't currently going on, we would have paid lower prices for hotels and things like that. Wow. They said the exchange rate was higher because of the negotiations, because that's when they get the noose a little tighter around their neck.
Wow. Well, what do people feel about Pezeshkian in the country? How do they feel about the prospects of these negotiations?
There is a lot of frustration. I mean, and I'm not saying this as an attack on the government, but I was surprised by how much. And it's also the access to people, but people come up to us in Farsi, and then people, like our English speaking friends, would translate, and people would say extremely critical things about the government, but they all had different views. They all had different reasons that they were critical. So Pezeshkian was seen as this figure who was attacked by all the other candidates, and so people voted for him because he was like the lesser, I guess, of all the extremes. And there are people that really support his negotiation with the West, and people that see it as useless and a waste of time and something that the U.S. is using in order to make Iranians suffer, and that the U.S. can't be trusted because we've made a deal and pulled out before. And the Israeli factor kind of just makes it so that whenever there's 2 steps forward, there's like 3 steps back with Iran. So there's mixed feelings, and there's a variety of opinions. It's interesting. People have very complex view. I mean, there are some people that are like, rah, bring back the Shah, and then other people that want the government to be more extreme in its confrontation with the West. So that's why you have someone like Pezeshkian at the front, because there are so many competing interests, or it's such a polarized place in a way that having him is a way of papering over some of those divides. But it also goes back to their tradition of just being so, I think, politically engaged, that their public was just wanting to talk constantly about politics, but more concerned with the domestic side, honestly, than the international side, because there's not high expectations looking at the U.S. right now, I don't think.
One thing I noticed in the video that Max uploaded from the Aerospace Museum was at the end of the video, he just asked a few questions, kind of just gave the mic to this young man that was working at the gift shop of the Aerospace Museum, very well spoken. And he was talking about how proud he was of the technologies, the advancement of the defenses of the Islamic Republic, and all these sorts of things. You said that a lot of the talk that the conversation people were having with you was about the domestic issue. Did you get any sense as to how people felt about the state of the axes of resistance when you have the martyrdom of Syed Hassan Nasrallah, Hashem Safiuddin, you have Hezbollah, which is severely weakened. You have you look at the fall of Syria and Assad,
Hania,
and
right there.
And also I'll add. I was going to ask you this later, but since you brought up Hania, did you get to ask anyone whether they think Raisi, his martyrdom, was actually a martyrdom, like it was an inside job, or someone took him out?
This is a very good question that I had for a lot of people. And again, there's a variety of opinion. I would say a few people I really respected said they believe it was an accident. They didn't think that the Israelis gained anything from going about it in that way. But there were plenty of people, once I think you're just asking average folks, who said, first, if they thought it was an accident initially, after what happened to Hania, they became more convinced that it was an Israeli operation. Whether that means there was compromise on the inside or hacking, things like that, is more complex. People don't have a clear answer about that. But definitely, we were there for the year anniversary, and there were billboards up commemorating Raisi, and there was also a feeling that he was really, as well as the foreign minister who also died in that attack, were crucial leaders in the resistance. The foreign minister was kind of called the foreign minister of the resistance, and that Raisi was an effective leader for them. They felt that as well, and so the loss was pretty grave. And people, after the brazen attack with Hania in the middle of Tehran at the time of the presidential inauguration, people, I think, began to accept that Israel had very high capability, and also the proximity to Azerbaijan for that crash, considering its relationship with Israel in the West, led people to believe that it was very possible that Israel did kill Raisi, but that it's smart for the Iranian government not to make a deal about it, because there's not really a move that they can make in response, right? So it's difficult, because assassinations like the one you mentioned, Soleimani and others, the assassination that took place in the Damascus embassy, these are all major blows, and I don't think it feels good to be an Iranian and experience those losses and feel like there's never a reciprocal eye for an eye attack, because there's not. Those people meant a lot to millions of people, and their shrines and their memorials all over the country are a testament to that. Max got to visit the Martyrs Cemetery, where the people who died in the Iran-Iraq War are buried, and also where some of the people killed in recent assassinations were as well. And people visit their graves every night, or every Thursday, every week. There's celebrations. It's part of their culture to remember these people. And it's again, it says a lot about what the Israelis have been able to get away with, I think. But again, there's plenty of people who would say, no, it was just an accident.
Speaking of what they're able to get away with, there's been reports that Israel is planning an attack on Iran. seemingly it wouldn't be an attack on the nuclear facilities because they're saying that they're going to go at this alone without, the needed direct U.S. support to actually attack the nuclear facilities in any meaningful way. Do you think that they might do something like this and do it in the middle of these negotiations?
I never put anything past the Israelis. They've made extreme acts before, including the USS, the attack on the USS Liberty and attack on U.S. soldiers. That was what I always felt was most likely, because we have all these troops in the region that are sitting ducks, and that would be a way for Israel to motivate our intervention. But I don't think they can get away with that now. I think if that happened now, the U.S. public, there's been enough of a breakthrough, I think, with the special relationship and people like Candace Owens coming out. I think there'd be enough high level media people and the influence that you have, and like people that didn't used to really have a voice in the media sphere. Now we do, and I think we'd be able to stand up to that propaganda pretty well. So Israel then, might be in the position where it's more likely to just act alone, but they are the suicidal nation. They are the reason that nukes exist. They are the ones that everybody's afraid will go too far, of going too far. And so that's why they pretty much, one of the reasons they have this noose around our neck. But yeah, it's up to the United States to break that, I think.
Well, thank God for Iran's hypersonic missiles. Hopefully they don't need to use them, but thank God they have them. Anya, I'm going to leave it there. I think that's a good place to wrap up on. Where should people follow along with your work, and when can we expect some new Red Lines?
I don't know if I'm coming back to Red Lines, but I will make appearances on Gray Zone live streams on the Gray Zone YouTube channel, and otherwise you can see me on X. Anya Parmpill. But yeah, I spend a lot of time parenting and doing that kind of stuff these days.
That is true. That is more important.
But one day, I mean, I like to work in the background, so you can always see what Max is up to, and
the best place to buy your book is, because I have it here. I actually have 2 copies here of your book in case I want to loan one out to someone. Where's the best place to buy your book?
OR Books. You can look them up. That's my publisher. You can get it on Amazon.
It's a great book, everybody. When I was in Venezuela and they were trying to coup Maduro during the elections, and I was debating people on TikTok live or Twitter live streams and stuff, I remember during the afternoons, I'd read the book, I'd reread parts, and then I'd go and debate these idiots. So
nice.
I think it's a great book. Everyone should check it out. Yes, it's the cheat sheet. Thank you so much for joining me today, and hopefully we can speak again soon.
Definitely. Take care, Jackson.